Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner. What does it take to start a startup? I'm your co-host Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on February 12th, 2025. Kris, what does it take to start a startup? Or should I say, what does it take to launch a product or start a product?
Yeah.
Today, we had a wonderful conversation, and I learned so much from David Hirschfeld. Hey Kris, let's talk about something that can really change the way you work. Data Courage's apps for Business Central. Data Courage helps you uncover the why behind your data. It's not just about looking at numbers, it's about truly understanding them. Their AI-powered apps for Dynamics 365 Business Central go beyond reports to give you real insights, things like recommendations, summaries, and suggestions you can act on. You can even chat with your data and ask the questions that matter. How's my profit and loss looking? Where are the risks? What's the best decision for tomorrow? And you'll get a clear, actionable answer. Now, how cool is that? Take their app, Financial Intelligence. It creates your profit and loss statement, balance sheet in minutes, gives you an instant pulse check of your financials, and frees up your time to focus on decision making. And they've got other apps too, ones that give you insight on customers and products. Oh, and here's the best part. Their AI is built with security as a top priority, so your data stays safe right where it belongs, in your environment. Are you ready to see what's behind your numbers and see the why behind them? If so, visit datacourage.com or check out their apps on AppSource. David, good afternoon.
Good
How are you
afternoon.
doing?
And my background flipped, or is it correct?
That looks good.
I think your background looks great.
Okay, because it looks flipped to me, but
It looks
I guess
perfect
it
right
looks
here.
like-
I can read it.
I guess you're looking from the inside out, so it's flipped.
I mean, looking at on my virtual camera, it's correct, but when I look at the Riverside, it looks like Techies is spelled backwards, and
Yeah,
Techies is on the left
I had the
side.
same problem. So from our view, it looks good, but I had the same
How
problem on
weird.
my end.
How weird is that? That it looks right to you. I've had this happen before. Yeah,
Yep.
where it looks right to you, not and wrong to me, but I don't care. It just needs to look right to you guys.
I think it would be unique if it was backwards.
You'll have to
Would be
watch it
unique.
with a mirror.
Backwards
Yeah.
and upside down, maybe. Yeah.
I think I'll have to go to a virtual background one time and do that and see if anybody catches that I'm living upside down or something.
We
Or maybe I
can't tell
just-
right
you don't
now
keep
if
it
your background is flip flop. Can't tell.
With me,
Okay.
you can't tell. That's why.
How weird.
I just leave it the
How
way it
weird.
is.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah,
That's definitely unique. It's
that's definitely upside down now.
And now you're in the upside down. Now you just have
Yeah.
to.
You think they get it? I don't think they get it.
The upside
I got
down.
it, but I think it would be even more creative if your hair stood up.
Oh
And
yeah,
so,
well,
like you were
that would
hanging
be
upside
really
down.
creative if I had hair to stand up. Actually,
Yeah. Well, actually, not having hair is actually an opportunity.
It's
Time
awesome.
saver.
actually. As soon as I started losing it, I just started shaving it, and I found out what I was missing my whole life was not having to take care of it.
I was in the army and I had a shaved head, and then when I got out of the army, because I liked it so much, I kept the shaved head. So
Right. Yeah.
I had never really grown it per se. I used to have a high
Yeah.
and tight, and then my hairline started changing. And then one year recently, I decided to grow it out to see what I have, and
And decided to shave it back.
yeah, I've had some experiments that I wanted to do with it, but I just like the not having any hair because of the convenience. You just
Yeah.
See,
It's
mine
usually-
was flipped, Brad, because when I shaved my hair off as for a long time, and then I worked for a beauty supply company, and they needed a quote unquote model for
Oh, geez,
men
here we
shampoo.
go.
And
Here
so
we go.
I was asked to grow my hair, and I've grown up my hair, and then of course I kind of stuck with it since. But I agree,
Well,
it's less maintenance, right? When you have no,
are
Yeah.
you
no hair.
still are you still a model?
No, I mean that was kind of like a here
In
and
his
there.
mind, in his mind.
In my mind, yes, I'm always going to
Yeah,
be
right.
like 25-year-old.
He said it, not me. But if you're not a
Right,
model
yeah.
anymore, you can shave your head. So
Yeah, how about the people that get to just be hand models? It's like, we don't really want to see the rest of you, but your hands look nice.
Oh, I heard about those. The insurance you'd have to put on your hands, right? Because like if that's
Right,
your
you have to put a hand,
bread and
right.
butter.
is there
Yeah,
even a market?
if you run headfirst into a truck, it's not a problem as long as your hands stay out of that accident.
Is there even a market for hand models anymore?
I don't have any, probably not. There shouldn't be, because you can just make prettier hands with AI now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That is true.
Speaking of AI, AI seems to be all over the place. Before we jump into the conversation that we wanted to speak about this afternoon, Mr. David, sir, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I've been in the software business for the last 35 years. I started out in enterprise. I started my own software company in the early 90s and I grew it to 800 customers in 22 countries and sold it to a publicly traded firm in 2000. Well, that was my successful exit, my initial one. And then I was VP of products for them for several years and then left and started another software venture that didn't go so well. And that one, after 18 months, failed. And that one failed. And I didn't realize the things I did the first time by accident that led me to success. I didn't do them the same way the second time. And if I had, I would have been successful in that venture too, because I was actually getting traction on the product that I built, but I was trying to get investment instead of generating revenue for my customers as a way of proving product market fit and building my business model, which I did the first time. So I started Techies after that failure. It was in 2007. I started Techies. That was 18 years ago. And I've been doing contract development for other people ever since. We actually have a couple SaaS products coming out this year, which are products that we're building for our own internal use, but they're products that other people that are struggling with the same products that we struggle with also need.
That's
so
interesting.
Really excited about becoming a blended service and product company.
Oh, excellent. So
Wow.
Techies, you started, you said 17, math is right, 17 years ago, you said? 18 years ago. I knew there was one of those. It's
I
late,
know,
in the, late in the day
thing.
over here.
Right. They carry the one type thing.
Yeah, let's carry the one, add the two, go upside down. Right. And so, Techies, you said you're writing software, contract software. You're writing contract software for yourself and others, and that's where you're creating the product? You're creating products for the others? Yeah,
we're writing software for other people, right? Okay. I've worked with over 90 startups over the last 17 years. A few of them really successful. The majority of them fail. And they always fail for the same reason that mine failed. And that's they wait way too long to start to generate revenue. And the only way you prove product market fit is you ask people to buy your product. And until you're asking people to buy your product, you don't know if you have a product market fit or not, no matter how confident you are, right? So, and then by the time most people, usually it's anywhere from 12 to 36 months before people formally start marketing their product. That's just sort of typical because founders are afraid to ask the hard questions of the customers. So they get it to a certain point, their MVP, then they want to add features. They put it out for free beta. They're getting feedback from the market. Often that feedback's misleading because these are not invested users. And plus they're focused on what their initial agenda is to make the software better for what they're doing, but they're not paying for it. So you don't even know if those are going to be paying customers once you put those features in. And then once they finally have the software in a shape that they feel it's really ready for market, which is usually several releases past MVP, then they start charging, only to find out people won't pay for it.
This here,
you can take me.
You just piqued my interest with the words that you had just mentioned. I want to try to unpack some of that because I think a lot of individuals think that it's easy to create a startup. A lot of individuals think that as you had mentioned, you create a product, everybody will come and you'll be successful and you'll be retired in 5 years, or you'll be able to spin it off and sell it for $15 billion. But a lot of individuals that work with startups, as you had even mentioned, you have successes, but you have more failures than you have successors.
A huge amount more failures than successes. And because to be successful with a software startup requires a lot of discipline and doing it the hard, easy way, I call it. The hard things up front makes everything go much easier later on. Most people don't want to do that. They want to get to building the product. Because they have a vision and they believe in themselves, right? Which is the kiss of death for a startup founder. The power of positive thinking, abandon that idea. Well, you got to be anxious and a contingency planner to the max and do the hard work up front to understand your market, understand the problems, understand the customer. And founders that love their product and believe in their vision fail more often than not. I mean, in mass numbers. The ones that love the problem and want to spend all their time talking to their customers, those founders consistently, much higher percentage, find a path to revenue and success.
I love that. Love the product. No, not love. Don't love the product. Right. Love the problem, and also have an exit planned, or I call it an exit, but you're saying a contingency because you may not be successful with your product.
Constant, everything. Yes. Contingency. There was I don't remember, I think it was the Happiness Lab. This is a podcast from this woman, Stanford professor Laurie Santos. It's a huge podcast. And she did a review of this concept of the power of positive thinking. And it turns out this was a myth that started in the 60s and just caught on, and everybody thinks it's great. But if you poll serial successful CEOs, what you find out, these are really high anxiety people. They say, I was lucky. I was just the right place, right time. I was lucky. And you scratch the surface just a little bit, and all of a sudden you find out that they were sure they were going to fail every step of the way, and they thought of everything that could cause them to fail, and they created contingency plans for everything. So that when something happened, it was like, of course, they were lucky because they had thought about it in advance and sort of had a plan around it. Those are founders that are critical thinkers, that are successful because they focus on what's the problem I'm trying to solve and what are the problems that can cause me to fail. And that's where they spend their energy. And by doing that, they make it so that they galvanize their machine to be successful, regardless of what happens in the market.
They didn't make up a problem. Like we know. They didn't make up any problem. They solving a problem. Yeah.
If they thought there was a problem, they went and got in front of customers, found out that wasn't the problem, it was something else. And the software ends up just being the natural conclusion to the process of mitigating the problem, not something to be in love with, just the thing to fix it, to help fix this problem for them.
Yeah. My mind is spinning. I probably won't even be able to articulate or communicate during this conversation because everything that you were saying is just resonating so deeply with me, because when you're creating products, you're trying to solve a problem. And if you lose sight of the problem and you continue to be invested in the product, it goes with what you're saying. This is my point of view, or I'm taking back from my experiences and also from what you're saying. They wait too long to make to generate revenue, meaning also, when do you start selling? When do you start charging? When do you bring market? Oh, I always have to add this one more thing and then it's ready. I always have to do this one more thing, then it's ready. And you get so lost in the product, and I've witnessed this as well, that you forget the problem that you're trying to solve, and you end up trying to solve problems that don't exist and add complexity as well to it as well. It's not just because you can doesn't mean you should. It just means you need to solve the problem in the easiest way possible, not in the most complex way possible, because you can get lost and it could take you forever to come to market with whatever it could be. In a product, we're saying it could be a software product. It could even be a physical, tangible product to solve a problem such as locking the door or something else. You need to make sure you understand and identify the problem to solve it.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, that word, the word feature is like if the word feature, it keeps sneaking into your vocabulary, that because you ask a founder, it says, yeah, well, we need this feature because it makes it much easier to do this. I said, as soon as you put the word feature in there, you've lost focus on the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
You're solving a problem, right? Not millions of problems at once.
Right. When you say,
is.
look at this feature and you're demoing the feature, you've lost sight of the problem and the customer while you're demoing, right? Because they don't care about your features. They care about you understand what they're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. No, thank you. This comes to many different areas. You know, we focus on business central implementations, ERP implementations, software implementations, architecture, solving problems and solving solutions. So what you're saying resonates with what I see in many implementations. Even it may not necessarily be a product, but it's a solution to a problem. That sometimes individuals get so lost in solving the problem that they lose sight of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's, I could do this. Oh, that looks cool. Could you add this? Oh, could you add that? Oh, we're going to add this. And you're never ready.
The core disappeared. Yeah, you lose the original.
Yes. So when do you bring a product to market? So, and what I mean by that is what considerations, if somebody is bringing a product to market, whether they're solving a solution for one particular customer or creating a product to satisfy a problem for many different businesses, what should they consider or think of before they bring it to market to also determine the success of the product? Or what are some things they should keep in mind? We talked about being anxious and having contingencies for foreseeable problems. What are some other factors that they should consider?
Yeah, that anxiety thing is more of a characteristic of successful serial founders as opposed to something you should strive to be, right? But the idea that you're always
striving to relax, and now you've just told me that I can be as anxious as I was. So I'm okay with that now.
But it's actually a kind of an indicator of potential success, right? So, and it's not the only path to success. There are some people that just have the charisma to bring business in, right? That's a different kind of founder, but that's the very, very rare founder. I was recently working with one of those, so I do know that's another path. But he was still an incredibly critical thinker and pivot based on feedback of the market and stay focused and simple. So he had all those instincts. He just also had the other X factor as well. And he just recently raised $5 million with very little effort. By the way, everybody get that out of your head. Don't pitch deck and MVP and get an investor. This is not the way to go. This is what every VC wants you to think, so that VCs have thousands of potential startups to sift through to pick the ones that they want. And they have promoted this concept forever. It's not how to launch. Unless you're a Stanford 20-something dropout in biotech and people are clamoring to give you money, here's the numbers. A typical VC is going to see 3,000 pitch decks. And I have corroborated these numbers with VCs. They'll see 3,000 pitch decks. Some initial person will kick out half of them. And then out of those 1,500 that are left, they'll do not a deep dive, but they'll do a more, they say, okay, these kind of fit our model. Let's see which ones look like they might be decent. And out of those, they'll get 100 of them that will go to an analyst, because the rest will get cut out for other reasons. And out of those, 60 will end up in front of the partners, and then 30 of them will get investment. Wow. So it's 1 in 1,000 is your odds. Is that right? 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100.
Yes.
1 in 100. There we go with the zeros again. 1 in 100 and carrying the one. 1 in 100 actually get funded. And out of those,
30 out of 3,000. Wait, we're going to go back to this. Right. Drop the ones. So 1 out of 1,000.
Yeah, so 1% of the 1% of those get funded, and out of those 1%, 70% will fail. So of VC-funded startups, 70% fail.
Wow, that's crazy statistic.
Become successful. Yeah. But well, because now you've got all this pressure on you and you've been thrown this money, and most people's instincts are wrong in terms of what you do when you've been given all this investment. So, or something shifted in the market. And it doesn't take much when you're in startup phase to derail you. Most of the time, it's something that could have been avoided or can be steered around if the founder's really got good instincts and is disciplined. But startups are very risky. People think but my idea is so brilliant, right? The word brilliant code for I'm going to fail. Right. I mean, there's so many code words.
I have the best idea. Everybody wants it.
Right. Yeah. Code words for I'm going to fail big.
Right? But isn't there always a start to something? So you're saying startups fail. So I try to take it back. You have to start something somewhere.
Right. Vision is not a bad thing. Having an idea that you believe in is not a bad thing until that belief becomes the thing that drives you forward. So, in other words, you haven't done there's no veracity around the belief. It's just a belief. And that's where founders stumble right at the very beginning. So what they need to do is peel off the black robe, and stop preaching about their great idea and how cool it's going to be, and put on the white coat and become clinicians and say, okay, does this really solve a problem? Who's it solving it for? What is the problem it's solving? What's the value? So the number one job when a founder starts a company or is going to start a company, he's got one job. And founders don't realize this, and I didn't. And I've fallen, by the way, this is not hubris. These are all the same mistakes I've made. So, this is hard knocks.
These are the best lessons to learn, or the best stories to hear, are the stories that people have experienced, because we can learn from it. And as you had mentioned, not every story is the same. Your experiences may be different than others that go through the process.
Exactly, right.
And the perspectives may be different as well, but we appreciate you sharing this with us.
Yeah. So one founder, the number one job. Oh, I'm happy to share it. And like
I'm all excited. I'm honestly sitting here,
very interesting,
being very quiet and listening to you, because the questions and the things that I want to say, if you could see my anxious little brain, it's going.
Yeah.
I can do that again.
Okay. Number one job. Yeah. I'm not going to try to unpack that metaphor exactly, but that was kind of cool. So I can't make those sounds, so that's why I think it's cool. Okay, number one job every founder has. Number one job. Okay, back up for just a second. Give you the context of this job. You're going to solve. You have all these potential niches you can market to, right? Because you've got a problem you're solving that usually applies to a bunch of niches, and when you look at it from the perspective of the stakeholder in that niche, and you dig down into the root of what problem it's really solving, it usually breaks out into several different problems, right? So you might have 10 root level problems that you're actually solving with this thing, and there might be 20 different niches. Okay. Your number one job as a founder is you have to pick one of those niches. And you can only focus on 2, at most 3 of those problems, and they have to be very tightly clustered. And those problems have to have these ingredients. They have to be to the stakeholder in the niche that you're selling to. It has to have a very high perceived impact because that problem to that stakeholder. Perceived means they believe that problem threatens them personally in some way. Because if it's not because they won't be motivated to listen to you if they don't have a high level of perceived impact to that problem. They won't hear you when you're trying to reach them. And independently of that, it has to have a high cost, because you can have a high perceived impact and a very low cost, right? And then you can't charge much for your products. You can't make a business out of it. You can have the opposite. You can have a very high cost, but a very low impact. Everybody in my industry has been dealing with that problem for 30 years. Nobody's going to support me to deal with that problem because we all do it, and we got all these other problems we got, so that's like the opposite, right? High cost, but low impact. So that's a hard sales job if you can't get somebody to believe that this is worth pursuing. So if you have both of them, then you can get somebody to listen to you because they believe that you understand the thing that scares them and pains them, and you can charge a lot for it so that you can build a business around it. And it's one niche, and you got to find those 2 or 3 problems. That's the number one job of every founder. And then you got to figure out what's the messaging so that they realize that you understand their problem. How much do I charge? What's the sales cycle? Is it the right niche? Because how long is the sales cycle? How easy is it to reach the stakeholders and buyers in that niche, right? These are all things that might promote a niche or demote a niche. But once you've done all this right, one niche should stand out as the clear early adopter, because it's the only person you can really sell. And that also informs what you need to focus on in your initial product. But we don't want to start building the product yet. This is launch first behind me. Launch your sales and marketing engine as a way of proving product market fit. Create a pre-launch sales model to this niche stakeholder. Create some kind of high fidelity prototype, which is basically an animated design mock-up that looks like a real product, not like just click-through mock-ups, but more than that, but not an MVP. Because MVPs are expensive, and you're having to commit to a certain aspect of your product in terms of what problem it's solving. When you build an MVP, a design prototype looks like a real product. When you demo it, they think you've already built it, but there's no software behind it. And you can pivot really quickly. You can get feedback. You can make changes, go and test the market again. You can test the market 2, 3, 4 times in the space of a few months. And when people start to buy it, in your high-value model, and a high-value model might be a lifetime license. Everybody goes, lifetime license? I'm not giving away lifetime licenses, right? But they don't step back and say, wait a minute, I could sell 100 licenses, lifetime licenses, for the price of maybe 18 months of a subscription fee, and bring in the same amount of money as I would if I went out and got a seed investment. But I'm only giving away an immeasurable fraction of a percent of my market. With those lifetime licenses, I have this big group now of invested beta users. They're not trials anymore. They're beta users. So we're not trying to do product market fit anymore. We're focused on product solution fit. In other words, making sure that now that they've got the product, they can use it and solve the problem in the way that they thought they could, and so that you don't have people getting it and then leaving the product later on. So you're focused on the glue at that point, not on the marketing, on what will people buy it. And you've got revenue, and the same amount of revenue that you'd give 10, 15% away if you got a seed investor. And all the work you do to get that investor, none of it is building your business. Whereas everything you're doing, if you do a pre-launch sale, it's all about building your business. You're building sales marketing, you're building the design, you're refining the design, you're understanding the problem even better and better every time you demo it, and you're getting feedback from potential buyers if they're not buying it. Because that's all you care about, is it's not solving the problem. Is it not important enough problem that it's worth buying in on this opportunity, which you won't get later on? You're going to have the product, or you don't know you're going to have, or is this the wrong market? They're not early adopters. Whatever it is, you're building your business and refining the sales and marketing engine. And once you get that magic kind of formula, then you start building a product and use the revenue from sales to then fund development. And if you do need to go to investors, it's a whole different discussion, because you've got a growing market, you've got traction, you've got revenue.
Yeah, that's a good call out. That you made a good point about balancing where trying to find, you understand the problem, and whether you put a lot of effort building it now and then later on no one was really interested, versus creating not an MVP, more of a click-through to kind of give you the concept of like, hey, this could work, this will solve your problem, and then be able to develop the MVP. That's a big problem in this space.
No, it is in a number of areas.
Just one thing, the click-through's got to be very realistic, not just does the screen's designed. It needs to function. The screens need to have drop-downs, and the data needs to look like a real product.
I have a nickname for that stuff. I call it vaporware. Like, it really doesn't exist, but it looks like it exists. Yes, and I don't mean I use that sarcastically, but it's serious, because I agree with what you're saying. And I see this over and over again, as Kris has alluded to, is everybody thinks that they have the greatest solution that everybody needs. They spend all this time developing it. Sometimes by the time what you started developing and the problem that you had solved was another key point that you had made. If you lose focus of the problem can change by the time you even finish. And then also, you think you're solving the problem in a certain manner from a technical point of view, not from a business point of view. So you take your solution, drop it in front of a user who has to use this solution or this product. Again, if we're talking software or even another product, they have to use it daily. Will they even use it the way that you architected and set it up? So going with that, what I call vaporware from the software side is something we used to always say is, we'd do a demonstration of a solution, see if we had the buy-in. If we had the buy-in, then we'd scramble and build it. So we'd kind of shell it. So it does look functional. You can visualize how
MVP,
it would work.
yeah.
Well, it's not even an MVP because if you tried to use it, it wouldn't do anything. But at least you could put stuff in there so they could see the flow of the screens, the flow of the data, or even how the product would hold up. Wow, this is...
And also MVPs only have a small part of your vision of the product. Correct. Whereas when you build the vaporware, and the actual term, if you want like something you can, sound smart about, it's called high fidelity prototype. Which is really just an animated design mock-up as well.
I like that. That's better than vaporware.
I learned that years ago. It's what they're actually called if you want an actual term that you could look
at. High fidelity prototype.
Prototype, yeah. But
got it.
You can build out the vision of the product in your high fidelity prototype, the 2-year roadmap, in a very short period of time because there's no intelligence behind it, right? It's just, but it has to look real so that when somebody looks at it, and you're demoing it to them, they don't ask you the question, how do I know you can build this? Because if they ask the question, you can't get that sale. They won't ask that question if it looks real. Even if you tell them it's not real software, they don't hear it because it looks, they must just be in test or something. That's what goes through people's minds. And they'll buy it if you got the business model right.
This is crazy. No, it sounds like you're saying that it requires a little bit of patience to really get this to the market and getting a lot of feedback loop from your end users. Because a lot of people, when they build a product, they want to make money as quickly as possible. And then, of course, they trip along the way. And they spend a lot of time on something that maybe you're not solving a problem at all. It's not even a problem. But...
it's not one that people feel is worth paying money for, or they're not, or they're the wrong, or you don't know who the early adopter is, or whatever it's the homework that hasn't been done properly in the very beginning, and that's preventing you from being able to create a revenue engine from it.
Yeah, and I think you said market research, right? That's a big component when you're building a product, a software that you need a market research to make sure that this is actually going to be the right tool that's going to solve a problem within an industry.
I am always a little leery of using the term market research only because it sounds like it has to be done by a marketing company, and marketing companies actually are lousy at this. Marketing companies are really good when you have some sales history and you know who your ideal customer is, and then doing the research on how to penetrate that market. That's what marketing companies do really well. They suck at startups. When you don't have any idea who that ideal customer profile is. Then you need a different kind of methodology, something that I created out of many arguments with marketing companies, a metrics-driven kind of approach to doing this. And I can even explain it. It's basically we score, take all the niches, and I have a methodology for how you define a niche, right? When do you know you've made it? It's an actual niche. And then the same thing with the root level problems. You figure out what all the root level problems you are solving. Then you score this grid in terms of how much impact on a score of 1 to 100 or 1 to 1,000. But just as long as there's enough gradient in the scoring, so that when you later on you're going to use those numbers to chart this, that you can see what floats to the top. And you do the same thing with cost. How much does it cost for each problem to each niche? So you end up with these two matrices that you bubble chart to each other. You take the top 2 or 3 problems from a scoring perspective and a cost perspective from each of the 2 charts, and you put them in a bubble chart, and you'll get 3 or 4 that'll float up to the upper right, the niches. And it'll be one of those that's your early adopter, and then you have to do the more deep dive stuff from that point. What's the sales channel? How do you reach them? What's the cost? What's the sales cycle? What's the market size of each of these niches, right? To try to figure out. And then and it's easy to test this by niche because you don't need 20 discovery interviews, which the whole discovery interview methodology is really subjective and very often takes founders in the wrong direction. Instead, as you're scoring these niches, you realize you don't know this niche very well and you're making up numbers. So you just make one or two discovery calls to a stakeholder in the niche at that time when you realize you need more information. And then you can fill out, you don't need 10, you just need one or two, because you're not trying to be perfect. You're just trying to generally triangulate around which ones are going to come up here and which ones are going to be down here. And then you do the deep dive on the 2 or 3 niches that float to the upper right in this bubble chart. And one of those becomes your early adopter, and it usually is easy. Then you do confirmation interviews, not discovery, but you do confirmation interviews. There you do about 15 or 20. Because now you have all your numbers, your assumptions, how much it should cost, what problems, how much the problem costs them, how much the impact is, right? The language to reach them. And then then you're doing your market research where you go out to 15 or 20 stakeholders in that niche, and in the niche that you believe is the early adopter niche. And you're looking for a really high affinity response out of at least 30% of those people. High affinity is like, oh, that problem is killing me. I'll do anything to get rid of it. I think you could charge more because you probably didn't consider this and this in your costs. That's where we go to, you're going to find a lot of people just like me in these various channels, things like that, right? I'd love to be part of your focus group as you're building the product, or that sort of, because this will probably be your first customers, will be those high affinity responses. If you get like 30%, then you've got a market and you've got an opportunity to sell into an early adopter niche.
With this, so we're talking, like I said, I have a lot of questions. So with this, so we're talking about finding the niche, finding the problem, determining if the problem is, or even how do you determine if the problem is a good problem to solve? You talked about the process to go through that. How do you find these problems? So there are chances where in our day-to-day, someone will come to us and say, I have a problem. I need to do X. Can you help me do this? And then you help them do X. Again, so you may be in the business of consulting to develop custom solutions for somebody for a product or for something else. How can you determine if a problem, I understand that the Matrix said that even find these problems to say that, okay,
to begin
this is a problem that exists somewhere. Now I need to solve it without somebody coming to you and telling you there's a problem. Is the way that you can search out these problems?
Well, so that's the entrepreneur looking for a business, right? As opposed to somebody who's starting a business. The best customers that I've had, the best actually customers I've had are people, I call them recovery customers, and those are people that have been working with other one or multiple software development teams in the past, and they've been struggling. And then we get them and they recognize how much better we are than the other ones they've been. Those are my favorite customers because I don't have to, because I already know how hard it is to build software, and all of a sudden it's not as hard as it was, right? So those are my favorite. But
those are your favorite. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I deal with those situations as well. And I'll give you back to your thought. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
But some of those customers, have you ever run into the problem where they've been sort of jaded in a sense where they may not trust you? I know you may do better and it takes time to build a relationship. They come in saying that I've already spent a volume of dollars trying to solve the problem with Kris. Then Kris couldn't do it, so I went to Brad. I spent more money. Now I'm going to you. I'm going to track every penny because I'm not throwing it away again.
Yeah, which is fine with us. We track every penny for them. So, if you go to my website, it says at the top, hyper exceptional software development team. And I don't ever ask anybody to believe me just because I put it at the top of my website. I say, let me show you what that means to be a hyper exceptional software team. And because exceptional teams produce artifacts that typical teams don't, which is evidence that's easy to understand what the difference is just by looking at that. They still not going to trust me until they see, and I don't expect them to until they start to see that we're delivering in the way that I promised we would, and then they become my biggest fans. So I love those customers. But we got off the topic a little bit only because...
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I said my favorite customers, and then I had to back up and say, okay, wait a minute. Okay, then behind that, my favorite customers are people that come from an industry whatever it is, where they are struggling with a problem on a daily or weekly basis. And it has to be daily or weekly, so it's top of mind all the time, right? And they can easily articulate how much that problem impacts them personally, and what it costs them, what that problem is costing them in some kind of monetary way. So, and then that person is also in an industry full of other people just like them doing the same thing they're doing, struggling with the same problem they're struggling with. And there's no obviously consumable product that's available that solves this problem well. What I mean by consumable, there may be really good products in enterprise, but I'm a small business, right? And so those are out of reach for me, things like that. And they have some reach to that community of other users. Like those are, you're already 50, 60, 70% of the way farther along than the entrepreneur that just has a great idea, whether it's a great idea or not, because they understand what they're trying to solve and who they're solving it for, and have some idea how to reach an initial group of those people. So those people understand a problem because they struggle with it already. So that's one way, like what you were talking about. That's actually the best way to start something. Or they recognize there's just a better way in my industry to do something that, well, I guess it's still the same thing. Like I have somebody in the healthcare world who realizes how much hospitals would save if they can predict illnesses. And he came up with algorithms during the pandemic that could predict somebody was going to be hospitalized 3 days before they started showing any symptoms. And it was like 95% accurate. Anyway, so that was a customer I've had for the last couple of years who turned that into an AI voice-enabled nurse that reaches out to somebody in lower income population, like usually Medicaid patients, and will go out and call them and have a conversation with them when they see things as a result of their wearable device that show patterns of there's something starting that we need to get a hold of before that person's in the hospital and it's costing the healthcare system a fortune.
That's genius, because everybody wears wearable devices. I wear a wearable device. I track everything. And to have somebody be able to analyze it where you can see a slight anomaly. Jeez.
Anomaly.
I got it. A slight anomaly that you may not notice because...
A slight offset, right, yeah.
That you may not notice, and somebody can see that trend based on other data as well, because that data has to go somewhere. I track all of this information with my sleep, my HRV, my steps, my heart rate, my oxygen, and it goes somewhere. I take a look at it, but someone to be able to alert me and say, hey, your resting heart rate slightly elevated, which it gets typically for me if I'm ill, they may be able to see that an illness may be coming. I think that's genius, and I think that's what we need. And it does. It becomes preventative maintenance on your body.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, but from a Medicaid perspective, it dramatically reduces the cost, the burden on healthcare, right? If you can catch that before they even have any kind of symptoms that person would recognize as something they need to do something about. Yeah. So anyway, that was an example of somebody who had a better way of doing something, but it came out of this initial research that he did on being able to do predictive analysis on diseases to try to reduce hospital costs, healthcare costs. But I can talk about like in my own world. So I'll give you a couple examples of some ideas that we are now pursuing, turning into SaaS products that I mentioned earlier. One of them is, as a result of a lot of the podcasting I do, I end up creating referral relationships with some of the podcasters and some people that hear me in the interviews and things like that. And they refer projects to me or I refer projects to them. And I have to have a way, and of course there's referral fees and all that involved, which can be really lucrative. And so I need to be able to track this in a pristine way. And after you get so many referral relationships, this becomes really difficult. So I went looking for software just for referral partner relationships, and there's nothing out there that's any good. You know, the stuff that is out there that's consumable is mostly about trying to establish these referral relationships, not about tracking and managing the relationships and the status of them, where you give the referral partner a portal where they can log in and see the status of the referrals or put a new referral in and see what they've earned and all that, right? It exists for affiliate marketing. It's been around forever for that. It exists for enterprise in the channel marketing world. There's a bunch of solutions there, but this is one of those consumable things. But for just somebody like me, who's got these loose referral not loose, I mean, but the referral partner relationships, and it's not some big channel partner program, there's nothing out there. So we're building that. Building it for ourselves originally, and then I'm going to go out and do a bunch of pre-launch sales, just like I talk about. And assuming that I'm getting the traction I want, then we'll add all of the SaaS scaffolding around it, and then start to market it, officially. But we're building it anyway because we need it. So another one, we do a very, very detailed job when we do estimates, way more than most software companies do.
So just, can I go back to what you said? So you're building the product for yourself. Right. Because you're solving a problem for yourself, but you also want to see if there's a market for that problem for others. So in that case, you're building something that you're solving one of your own problems, so you can have some measure of success there. So even if it's not something that is marketable or sellable to others in the state, you at least benefit from it because you gain efficiencies.
I was going to build it anyway. And then talking with people, I find out that they need the same thing, so that they can manage their referral partner. And I've had many people say, well, let me know when it's out. And I thought, okay, you know what? So we'll make it a little prettier than we would have for just our own internal use, but not much. It's still not going to be some beautiful polished product when it's done, but it'll be usable. And that's all I care about right now, usable and reasonable in terms of the user experience, so that I don't hate using it. Because if I do, then we'll start ripping it apart and fixing that. But I'm solving a problem for myself, and in the process of doing it, it turns out that this looks like there may be a market for this product. So another one, we do, like I was saying, estimates. When we do a project estimate, we go into way more detail than most software shops. And I know that because I talk with a lot of other founders of custom software shops, and we talk about, oh yeah, we do really detailed estimates. And I say, yeah, so do we do it. Would you like to see how we do it? Because maybe I'll learn something from them if they show me theirs. So I always show them mine first. Right. And when I show it, they go, oh no, we don't. Our estimates are really high level compared to yours. That's really cool. How do you tell me more about your process? And every single time I get that. So that's how I know that they're way more detailed than most. But it's expensive process to do that, right? Because it takes my most expensive people. We break it down into an actual functional module delivery on what we're going to build and put estimates to each one of those modules. And the modules have to be broken down small enough so that they fit in what we call t-shirts. So it's a t-shirt sizing methodology which we didn't invent, but we've kind of built on that. So we're building an AI model around this, which on the 20th of this month, I'll see the first version of this ready for us to start using internally. We're building it around Google Sheets because that's how we do our estimates now. But it'll be all generated and hopefully even improve how we do our estimates now. And again, I've heard from other software shops that I've talked to that they want the same thing because it'll help them make better, the estimates will be more accurate, and it'll also make their proposals more effective, right? Because they'll have so much detail. And then so I'm going to go out, do a pre-launch sale model on that once we've got that, and we know it works for us. And then we'll build the SaaS, the UI, which we've already created the design for the SaaS, so I can demo that. But we're not going to build any of those really pretty screens until we know that there's a market for it.
So with that product that you're talking about there, you're solving a problem for estimation, which is a challenge and a struggle for many across many different industries or software industries, because software to me is rather general. It's almost like someone saying, I work in IT, I work in software, because software can cover many different facets of problems, industries, functions, languages. The model that you're working with, is it applicable to a specific type of industry, type of product, or is it an estimation model that can be used across the board?
Pretty much across the board. Pretty much across the board. I mean, and it will give you the ability to make adjustments so it's learning from your team's level of expertise and ability to deliver and manage project, because a lot of an estimate has to do with the team, right? In terms of how accurate you are. The estimates will be accurate based on certain assumptions that it makes initially. But you can change those assumptions and teach it based on things you already got that are components that you've built that reduce your time in certain areas and other areas where you don't have much expertise, and it adds time. And as it's learning, it'll start to be really accurate for your own team.
So,
or anybody's team. Yeah.
So David, the problem you were trying to solve then, and forgive me if I had missed this when you're explaining it, was that it took too long to create an estimate or statement of work. Is that the biggest problem that you dealt with? Or?
Cost and time. I want to give a customer an estimate within a day or two, but we never can block out enough time of my senior people where they can dedicate to it, right? First, they have to evaluate the requirements, look for gaps, go back to the client to clarify, right? And take the requirements and turn it into something organized that the client can go back through and review and make sure that it's in enough detail and that everything's there that they understood. And then, right, so this model does all that, as well as then does a module breakdown of it and puts the estimates to everything based on our team's expertise. And eventually it'll also then say, okay, this is the team mix you need, and here's the duration and how the team is allocated over the period of 3 or 4 months or whatever that estimate time is. Because we do that too, but the software won't do that initially.
That is a great problem to solve, because that is common right now. I mean, even from even if it's not just a software problem, and even if it's just like a consulting, you're putting a statement of work. It's a lot of work to put that together, because then you got to take into consideration of all the things you've learned from a discovery, and then translate that and then provide a solution. So it sounds like this one, your tool, your software would expedite a lot of that, which gives you a quicker turnaround time. And then where the client doesn't feel like they're waiting weeks for you to respond to an RFP, which is, we all know that takes forever, right? To respond to those.
RFPs. I love RFPs, Kris. Yeah. Those are the best things in the world. They're so general and vague. I'd rather just say, everyone picks on me the way I say vague too, I'm sorry. But I'd rather have somebody just call me up and say, here are some questions I have and you can answer them, because the basic generic questions, does your software have this, or can you do this? Yes, no, requires modification, can't be done. I can take any question and say, it depends.
Yes.
Do you have a chart of accounts? What do you mean?
And then they get really stupidly detailed for things that really aren't going to matter. Like,
exactly.
Tell me what hospital were you born in and where did you? Right.
It's crazy. Right. You see these RFPs over these years. I understand the concept of using it to try to maybe narrow down your focus to go for some more detail. But with such broad questions, anybody can go, well, yeah, we do that, but does it require modification? It depends. How detailed do you need to be in your chart of accounts, for example? Or is if it's I agree with it. I do. I just remember those questions. Exactly. I remember one specifically, and they hammered on a particular topic that was so basic with pure details and such broad stroke on it was actually had to do with like interfacing and connectivity and processing of the data. It's like, oh, can you interface with other systems? Like one question. Versus, and then they were talking about purchasing, and it was like 1,000 questions, and sometimes the same question worded differently.
Yeah, right.
I see those on RFPs as well, where it's
they want to catch you.
I don't know if they want to catch you or if they just take it and copy and paste in the questions and adjust them. And I always say, well, if you want to talk to me about an RFP to see if we're even in the same space, let's go through it together, and I can ask you the questions. To save everybody's time.
But they won't do that.
The crazy part is that they put all the effort, and then at the end, it's like, oh, we didn't really need all of this, or there's a simpler process. No. And you just killed all this time putting that together.
They just have to look like they're making a decision independent of any kind of influence, right? That's usually where these RFPs come from, or they just want a bunch of people to provide them proposals without them having to do any kind of engagement with those people until the proposals are out. It's one or the other. Either way, to me, it's just it's a lazy way of making decisions.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, especially for, your consulting firm that you're trying to build your business, and
Yeah.
the more volume that you get for these RFPs, or even putting together a statement of work, you're going to be living in it. That's all you're
Right.
going to be doing, because it takes too long to build those out.
Yeah.
So this is exciting that you're building. So
I
looking
like
forward
the
to see
idea
this.
of it. And for the record, I don't mind someone asking questions if we can do something. I'm just saying RFPs and the general concept are so broad and vague that they're wasteful of everyone's time. It's not just the time of the individuals filling it out. It's the time
Yeah.
of who puts it together, the time that who's to analyze it and collect it and such. Not to
And
go off
then
on a
you
little
don't
tangent
know
there.
anything forever while you're waiting for them to,
Yeah.
they close it. They're reviewing. You're sure that they have no interest in you because you can't get anybody on the phone and they haven't responded after 2 or 3 months, right? And then you find out you're a finalist, or that they already picked somebody and contracted them before you ever spoke to somebody, or it's just very frustrating. You have to really have a thick skin and do a lot of RFPs to not take each one sort of as a personal failure.
Yeah, no, again, it's business. You can win some, you
It's
lose
business,
some,
right?
as they say.
Right.
It's you always have to take things and make it not personal.
Well,
I think when it comes to business.
With RFPs, I always feel like you either are in the business where you're responding to lots of RFPs, or you not touching RFPs.
Yeah.
There's no real happy medium there.
And those that want to do them the night before, thinking they can just whip through it.
Right. It's so easy. It's so easy. Do you remember what hospital you were born in?
Me? No,
The name,
absolutely.
specifically the name.
The obscure questions that come up. I'm not. That's obviously I'm kidding.
I understand. I like
yeah.
My sarcasm level is off the charts. Oftentimes people can't tell that I'm being sarcastic, which is unfortunate. So it's tough.
Well, I get it.
Oh, good. See, I like this. Okay, so what else do you have? I mean, this whole startup journey, I know we wanted to talk about some other topics, but we seem to have gone down this startup road, this product road, because it's important to understand. And it's not even just a startup company. I'm taking it and maybe looking at it from a step back is even taking a product to market. So you may be an existing company that may want to bring another product to market.
Right.
And the considerations would be the same. It's almost as if you're creating
it's new. If it's a new line of business,
Yes. Well, because in essence, you go back to your venture capital and funding. If you already have a seasoned business, successful business, and you have a new product that you want to bring to market,
right?
Even if you're funding it yourself, it's still somebody providing the capital for that to fund it. And all of the things that we have spoken about during this session still come into play to make sure that you have a market, because you may not be wasting or spending. I don't use the word waste. It's the sarcasm. You may not be spending somebody who's funding you their money, what they call the free money, but it's not free because you do pay it back somewhere within your product, sometimes even a little bit more. No one's going to give you money for free, but you're funding it yourself. Right. Yeah. So you need to make sure that you really understand where is your money going, so that the product that you have, you understand your success, because not many people want to just give money away.
Right.
It is interesting. Oh, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you go ahead, because I've been talking a lot.
No, it's all good. So I'm very interested in this conversation about the startup journey, because Brad and I have worked in the ERP side, which is Nav, and now Business Central. Now, Business Central, as the software application itself, now has an app source or marketplace that people can download. So that we're starting to see a lot of these applications popping up, and I think it's an important conversation to have. How do you get into that space? What kind of problems you're solving? Because they are popping up everywhere. There's like over 5,000 applications now in the market app place, and it's growing. But I think it's important for people to understand what it would take to take a product a product that is trying to solve a problem in the Business Central space, and how do you market? How do you get it in front of people? How do you get people to buy into it? I think is an important conversation.
Yeah. So if you're, let's say, there's a lot of different types of products that you might launch when you're creating a new product in your company. One is a product that fits into a category of products that you're already successful selling. And so that's where your marketing department's going to be able to, be very successful in helping you craft and launch the marketing and the outreach and everything else, because you're already in that business or some aspect. Like I'm a Fritos and I'm coming out with a new type of chip, for example. That would be that type of product. Or um, um, I'm an ERP, and I know that many of my ERP customers need some CRM functionality in the ERP or accounting functionality. And so I'm coming out with a new accounting product, and I already have lots of requirements from my clients, right? So these are all kind of in your channel. You know who you're marketing to, you know who your ideal customer profile is, and all those things. But a lot of companies there's a growing number of these things called innovation centers in large companies, where they're looking for company employees to innovate on ideas that may not be lateral to what they currently do, may be different. And Google's famous for this, right? In fact, I don't think they started it, but they were certainly the ones that made this idea of innovation being a part of your job. You get a day every week to innovate on your own things. And as a result of that, products that are completely different than anything else they had came out of that, like Gmail and things like that, when they were a search company. And for those products like that, then something like Launch First makes total sense, because though you don't know who the ideal customer profile is necessarily for these new products, right? So you're really innovating something completely new, like an entrepreneur, and you have to start from scratch. So now in a big company like that, one of the benefits you have is your own internal users. You can see how well they're adopting these new solutions, and it gives you sort of an early adopter perspective that you wouldn't have if you're not a big company. But there's a lot of smaller companies that come out with new products that they have enough money and they're successful, and now they've got a new idea, but it's not directly related to their product. But I guess what I would coach them is, don't build that product, find something that fits into your existing market and go after that until you've gotten really big. But a lot of companies, they start to feel like they have to spread the risk around to completely different markets earlier than maybe they should. And for those, they should, go back to lean startup. So a lot of my ideas come from lean startup, not all of them. A lot of them just come from my own experience. Like the whole pre-sale model is not a lean startup thing. Comes from the idea of test it, come up with you got an idea, so to make a hypothesis about what you think the outcome should be, come up with a way of testing that and a way of measuring the results of that test, so you know what's success and what's not. And then, and that's, right out of Lean Startup Handbook. And we just do the same thing for doing pre-launch sales, as that's how you measure success, is you're generating enough revenue. And the metric for that, by the way, for SaaS, is you have enough, your cost of sale versus what you calculate as your lifetime value of your customer. There's a 3-to-1 ratio there, because you need enough profit in there so that you now can take that profit and put it back into the system to scale and grow your company.
When you're looking at the testing of your product, and maybe if it's a new product or an existing product, and then I have another question about launching a product. Do you ever do any A/B testing? Do you recommend any A/B testing across different customer bases to see if it fits outside of maybe a target for a broader range?
Well, that's what that whole matrix process is. It starts because you're looking at all of the different niches, right? And you're scoring them. So you're sort of A/B testing it from a theoretical perspective, given the idea that you understand those niches well. And if you don't, then you're going out and talking to the customers, not about your product, but about their problems. By the way, there's a great book. It's my favorite business book.
I love reading.
The Mom Test. Are you familiar with that?
You can't even say that. I didn't even know there was a book, but that's what I always say.
Yeah.
If that's a book, it's
really?
Yes. I swear on anything on this planet, I always say to everybody, I always use my mother, because if my mother can use it and my mother likes it, then it's okay, because it has to be something my mother can use.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very similar, but it's not quite the same.
I want to hear this now. I'm
what's
I'm
this
looking
book?
this book up.
The problem with asking your mom if she thinks that she can use that, or if she thinks your idea is good, assuming you have a good relationship with your mom, right? She's going to say, "Oh, of course, I think it's a great idea. You're so smart. You'll figure out how to make it work." Right? That's not helpful.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying if I have my mother has a problem and I can create something for her to use,
yeah,
then it's a good product because it's simplified to a point where my mother can use it. Because what I see oftentimes is people create something so complicated and complex, they eliminate a huge market of the population because it becomes too involved and too complicated to use.
Right.
So yes, I'm sorry. So what's this mom test book?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
let's hear this one out.
No, it's funny that you say that often. That is right. From a UX perspective, I totally agree with what you just said. But from whether or not your idea is a good one or not, your mom is the worst person to ask about your ideas. But how would you ask your mom the questions in such a way that you would actually get honest answers from her about whether the ideas are good? And that's what the mom test is, why it's called the mom test. And it's not really about asking your mom, but that's metaphorically what the book is about. It's when you go out to the market, most people do their product research with customers by talking about, maybe talk a little bit about the problems they're trying to solve, and then they go into features of what they want to build and try to get feedback. And people don't give you honest answers, sometimes because they're just lying, but a lot of times just because they don't know until they don't have enough context to know what the honest answer is. So the mom test talks all about the fact that when you're doing market research on the product you want to build, you never talk about the product ever. You only talk about the problems customers struggling with, how they've dealt with those problems historically. Have they ever found products that satisfy the problem, that mitigate the problem, and why did they stop using it? And you just focus on them and their problems, and never ever bring up your product or any features. Would this, if you had a product that did this, would that help? They don't do that, because then they immediately start shifting into wanting to make you feel good mode, and you get nothing valuable out of it. So that's why and the guy is a serial entrepreneur. His name's Rob Fitzpatrick. And a successful serial entrepreneur, and he has just a brilliant way. I talked about some of these concepts myself before I found his book, but he goes way more in depth. He has a whole system for how you do this from the conception of your product to even after you launch and you're selling it. How you speak to customers to get honest truth from them, so that you can basically create the right sales cycle, the right product, the right features in a product that really connects with them and syncs with what they need.
So does the conversation need to start asking and talking about the problem, and then do you go back then and do a demo? Like, let's say, for example, you already have the product that will, potentially solve the problem, or maybe you had a conversation with them and you know that your product will solve that problem. When do you want to demo that and show that to that prospect?
Well, if you're approaching all this right, they would ask you for it. I mean, if you're solving a problem that's big enough that they need solved and cost them enough, and you've already and you've made them feel like you really understand their problem, then they naturally assume you can solve that problem. They're going to draw you in, right? As opposed to you having to find some way to get in front of them. There are exceptions to that, but in general, that's kind of what you're after. So it's like the difference between selling and consulting. So when I'm talking with somebody, for example, about the project, first time I've talked to them, they don't know me, all right, and they're kind of questioning me to find out whether I'm somebody that is even worth talking to. Usually in the first few minutes, they'll ask me something or say something that I'll disagree with, and because they have some perception, and I look for those opportunities. I say, no, that's not how it works, or you can't do it that way, or I won't do it that way, and here's why. Because now I've created a schism with them, and now it gives me an opportunity to create a bridge. I said, however, let's look at it from a different perspective, and I give them a bridge to something that feels good to them, and now all of a sudden we have a relationship. where we did not have a relationship. I was a salesperson. They were somebody looking for, and I don't do this intentionally. I just realized sometime, years ago, that this seems to happen often in my conversations, just because I'm very honest when I'm talking with people about what I can and can't do, what I think they should do, what I don't think they should do, when I don't know what they should do. And I usually can back those things up with something. And I can tell right away when we've had that moment, usually in the first few minutes, because then they start to ask me for help instead of trying to figure out whether I'm somebody worth working with, right? And now it's, so in a sales situation, when you connect with a customer from that same kind of perspective, where they feel like you really understand their problem, you might be able to help them with it. And now it's not about trying to find a way to show them the product. It's more just about sort of planning to show how you've mitigated the problem, because they want it as much as you want to show them.
I like that.
Speaking of problems, from the conversation that we've had thus far, I've been inferring that it's a problem that may not have been solved, or it's a new problem, or if it's a problem that everybody has. What about products that solve problems that have already been solved? For example, the general broad, there are many people need to communicate email. There are many email clients out there to serve email within organizations or for individuals. What's the approach, or what's the consideration for taking an existing problem that has a solution and coming up with an alternative solution?
Right. Nobody's going to buy that if that's all they think. It's just another solution that does the same thing. If it's not solving a problem, okay, everything gets down to problem and how much somebody feels impacted by the problem, which an impact means that it creates some level of fear in them. About with this problem. If they don't get rid of it, then I'm never gonna grow my business. My competitors, will eat away at my customer base. I'm going to start losing people in my team because they're unhappy with, because I don't realize there's problems with a manager until it's too late. Whatever it is, right? Or I've got people walking out of a restaurant. One of my 3 restaurants, one of them's losing customers and leaving 1-star reviews because of a bad wait person, and I don't realize, right? These are problems that I feel that threaten me in some way. Or if it's your ERP system that, you always have a fear that you're not running your organization, your distribution, manufacturing, delivery, whatever it is, well enough in some respect. And if you can tap into whatever that is, then people will lean forward and go, and because they realize you understand what the problem is, you'd only be talking about it if maybe there's some way you can help resolve, mitigate that problem. Even vacations. Why do people get excited listening about vacations? Because they're afraid that if they miss out on these vacations, they're going to live a dull and boring life. It's all, I don't like the idea of it. I used to fight against this idea, but I realize that it all comes down to trying to mitigate your fears. If you can tap into the real root level of those fears, and I don't mean like you're trying to, basically become a horror film to somebody, but but you basically people want to feel better than they do because they're afraid of afraid of whatever that is that's making them feel that way.
Most decisions are made based on emotion, if not all. So it's tapping into, is exactly what you said, is you're tapping into the emotion of someone making the decision. Right. A person makes decisions based on emotion. And a fear is an emotion. I'm going along with what you're saying, but I am afraid of something, so I'm going to make this decision, or this is going to make me happy, or I feel good. Right. So I'm making this decision because of that.
If that's going to make me happy, and I'm afraid that I won't be able to capture that happiness if I don't do it. Right. There's some fear that's driving it. Right.
Yes.
If you're just always incredibly happy and so satisfied with everything, nothing's ever going to get you excited or motivate you to make a decision because there has to be a perspective, right? This has to be better, and this is worse, and I don't want this worse, right? Even if it looks like I'm only doing it because this looks like it's going to be really fun. If I don't do it, right? I thought, this is going to be fun, and if I don't do it, I'm going to miss out, right? FOMO. I'm
Yeah,
going to miss out on this really fun thing. How horrible would that be, right?
You're pulling on that emotional string.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
there's so much involved with all of that process. So it's
Right.
it's a lot
But
to tap
the only
into.
reason to put a product out there, a new product out there, is because you're mitigating a problem of, you're tapping into somebody's fear. And they're real. I'm not trying to make it sound like you're manufacturing fears. These are real things. Like maybe it's a new ERP system. ERP systems are really expensive. And maybe you have one that's equivalent, but it's a third the price. And for some companies that can't afford the bigger ERPs but need it, that's a huge problem to solve. Or even though all the functionality exists, remember I said one of them is consumable, right? If the problem is if there's nothing out there that's consumable, or you may have something now, but it doesn't integrate with other things that this particular niche needs desperately. And so now that's a niche you can use to get your product into an industry that might be already saturated. But if that doesn't exist, you're never going to sell it, right? If you can't find that thing that people need to fix, then there's no reason for them to buy it.
This is very insightful because I'm learning a lot about the path that you're taking as sort of a startup mindset, but maybe you've been in the business for quite a while, but you still have that startup mindset of growth and trying to put a solution out there.
That's how I look at it. I look at it, to me, it's a dual conversation. We're talking about startups, things to consider, but also for mature companies that are trying to bring a new product to solve a new problem coming into market. It's still, to me, in my opinion, it sounds like it could be the same way, or the same process.
I think it is. Yeah. If it's not, again, in a channel they're already really familiar with, and they're just adding another brand in the same channel.
Yeah, you said you use Doritos, you're adding, spicy Doritos or cheesy Doritos.
Right.
You still have a core product, you're just expanding upon it. But if you're branching off into, you're making Doritos and now you realize you want to start making, it might even, I don't know, soft drinks might still be in the food product. Yeah, shoes. You're going to apparel.
Right.
It would be a different story.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is good. Well, Mr. David, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I've learned a lot. We did have more that we wanted to speak about, so we'll have to see if we can coordinate.
We'll have to bring you back.
Yeah. I'd love to have you come back for part two on this, because I really wanted to talk with you about some of the AI and workflow topics that we had discussed previously.
Which is what I thought we were going to talk about too. So this is, but it's fun talking with you guys. So I'd love to come back and do it again.
No, I would definitely like to reschedule something. We'll finish something after. I apologize for taking another tangent, but when you started talking about the startups, I got a little excited, and it's a little bit of what you do here when we talk with everybody. We really don't have a format. We'll pick a couple of topics, and whatever sticks with the conversation, we'll expand upon. But you expressed some valuable insights. I've learned a lot. I have a lot of different perspective on some things. So I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today, and also the valuable information that you shared. And I definitely will reach out to you afterwards to get you on for part two, because if the AI workflow, this is another struggle. I talked about this in a previous episode that we just released maybe a week or two ago.
Yeah.
I really need to incorporate AI into my workflow to help me keep up with tasks. And I was super excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah.
So we'll hopefully get that soon.
I think we spent a lot of time in RFP, right? It's kind of, it's perfect.
It is perfect. But in the meantime, we do have your guest information, the guest section of the podcast. We have your information. And if anyone would like to reach out to you to learn more about startups, learn about some of the great things that you're doing, or some of the other valuable insights that you have, what is the best way for someone to contact you?
Go to techies.com, which is spelled TEKYZ.com, TEKYZ.com. And you can email me directly. Don't put my email link in the thing, but if somebody makes it to the end of the show, then to me, they should get my email, david@techies.com.
Absolutely.
And feel free to reach out to me directly, and on any subject. And if I can just be helpful and steer you in the right direction, I'd love to talk to you, whether it has anything to do with future business for me or not.
No, perfect. Thank you. We appreciate
Wonderful.
that. And again, we appreciate your time. Time is, to me, is the currency of life. Once you spend it, you can't get it back. Any minute you spend doing one thing, you're not doing another. And we truly value the time that you spent to speak with us today and share your insights with us and those that are listening. And I definitely look forward to talking with you again soon.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that soon. And thank you, guys.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao. Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.